So, Aya Majzoub, Bahrain researcher for Human Rights Watch, welcome and thank you for giving us this opportunity to ask you some questions regarding the situation in Bahrain prisons.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Uh, as per your knowledge, you might see that the Bahraini activists started a campaign on social media urging the Bahraini government to release the political prisoners, especially and those who and the other prisoners who does not represent a threat to the society amid the outbreak of coronavirus. Uh, to protect their lives and to protect the community from a huge spread. After all these calls, Public Security Chief Major General Tariq Al Hassan announced that they prepared the prison's health environments as precautions to face the threat of COVID 19. How do you evaluate such announcements in the light of the political prisoners' continuous complaints of denial of the right to medical care and the absence of adequate medical care inside the Bahraini prisons?
So, as you probably know, Human Rights Watch and other rights groups have documented persistent problems with Bahrain's prisons, including overcrowding and hygiene problems. So, there was a scabies outbreak at the Dry Dock Detention Center in January 2020, infecting more than half the population. In 2016, even a government agency found that some buildings in the Zhao prison suffered from bad hygiene, insect infestation, and broken toilets. Additionally, we have documented consistent denial of adequate medical care, particularly for political prisoners. This unfortunately hasn't changed very much during the COVID outbreak. We've spoken to two political prisoners who were in the jail prison when the COVID outbreak started happening in Bahrain. And they told us, unfortunately, that the prison authorities didn't disclose their plans to reduce the risk of COVID 19 infection, and it didn't ensure that detainees had all the vital information that they needed about the virus, including how to protect themselves against infection. Additionally, the political prisoners that we spoke with said that prison authorities didn't take any additional precautions to prevent the spread of the virus, including sanitizing the prison or providing detainees with cleaning supplies and protective gear. Another political prisoner that we spoke with said that despite his requests for protective gear, those were denied. So, of course, we do have a lot of concerns about the condition of the prisons, and if there were an outbreak in the prison, we would be very worried about the impacts of that on the health of detainees.
After what you said what you said that you spoke to political detainees inside the jail prison, that leads us to my next question. You might, of course, you've seen the report of the Bahraini TV about the National Institution of Human Rights chairperson Maria Khouri, who visited the prison with a group of journalists to praise the situation inside the prisons and to say that they are complying with the human rights standards and with the protective or the precautions of the World Health Organization to face COVID-19. After after their visit, the detained journalist Mahmoud Al Jaziri challenged the allegations of Maria Khouri, the National Institution for Human Rights chairperson, saying that the situation in Jaw prison, he detailed that the situation in Jaw prison is not what was seen on the TV. Actually, the building that she visited with the journalists was a new building, and usually the political prisoners are not held there, and the video calling which she claimed that the prisoners had access to at that time they didn't. The political prisoners at that time they didn't had access to such calls with their families, and they put so much restrictions, more restrictions on their communication with their families. So, how do you comment on the practices of the National Institution for Human Rights, which resorted to the official media to praise the situation in the prisons? And we all know how bad the situation there is, as if she was trying to justify the continuous detention of the political prisoners.
We have ongoing concerns about the reliability and independence of these oversight human rights mechanisms. We have documented on several occasions that they weren't transparent. In at least one instance, they also shared confidential information that Human Rights Watch was privy to publicly. So there are, us as Human Rights Watch, the UN, and other rights groups do have continuous concerns about the independence of these human rights mechanisms.
Some activists who are affiliated with the Bahraini government claimed that the the Bahraini government allowed a delegation of Human Rights Watch to visit the prisons recently. When was the last prison visit for Human Rights Watch, and what were your demands, or what are your demands at this stage? And if that visit was really happened, from what you witnessed, what is the expected fate of the political prisoners if novel coronavirus swept the prisons in Bahrain?
Well, we unfortunately, as Human Rights Watch, haven't been able to even enter Bahrain in several years. So the information that we get from Bahrain is usually through remote interviews with detainees or with their family members. Of course, we have been calling now for several years that we be allowed to visit Bahrain and we be allowed to independently assess the situation of the prisons there. We've also been calling on Bahrain to accept the visit of UN special rapporteurs who can also visit prisons, visit detainees, and provide an accurate representation of the human rights concerns in Bahrain. Unfortunately, despite us making these calls for several years now, our calls have gone unanswered.
Mhm. And as a researcher on Bahrain and as a human rights advocate, what is your message to the Bahraini government through this outbreak?
The Bahraini government should really be using this opportunity to release people who should not have been held in detention in the first place. We do welcome their release of 1,486 detainees. That was a very positive step. However, it was insufficient. There are many, many other political prisoners who should not have been imprisoned in the first place. They were imprisoned solely for peacefully exercising their right to free speech, free expression, or free association. And those people should be released. And then everybody remaining in the prison as well should be given appropriate information on hygiene, and they should be given supplies, and the prison authorities should ensure that all areas accessible to prisoners, prison staff, and visitors are disinfected regularly.